The Priest's Supper. It is said by those who ought to understand such things that the good people, or the fairies, are some of the angels who were turned out of heaven, and who landed on their feet in this world, while the rest of their companions, who had more sin to sink them, went down farther to a worse place. Be this as it may, there was a merry troop of the fairies dancing and playing all manner of wild pranks on a bright moonlit evening towards the end of September. The scene of their merriment was not far distant from Inchigeela, in the west of the county Cork, a poor village, although it had a barrack for soldiers, but great mountains and barren rocks like those round about it are enough to strike poverty into any place. However, as the fairies can have everything they want for wishing, poverty does not trouble them much, and all their care is to seek out unfrequented nooks and places where it is not likely anyone will come to spoil their sport. On a nice green sod by the river's side were the little fellows dancing in a ring as gaily as may be, with their red caps wagging about at every bound in the moonshine, and so light were these bounds that the lobs of dew, although they trembled under their feet, were not disturbed by their capering. Thus did they carry on their gambols, spinning round and twirling and bobbing and diving, and going through all manner of figures, until one of them chirped out, "Cease, cease with your drumming. Here's an end to our mumming. By my smell I can tell a priest this way is coming." And away every one of the fairies scampered off as hard as they could, concealing themselves under the green leaves of the Lusmore, where if their little red caps should happen to peep out, they would only look like its crimson bells, and more hid themselves at the shady sides of stones and brambles, and others under the bank of the river, and in holes and crannies of one kind or another. The fairy speaker was not mistaken, for along the road which was within view of the river came Father Horrigan on his pony, thinking to himself that as it was so late he would make an end of his journey at the first cabin he came to. According to this determination, he stopped at the dwelling of Dermot Leary, lifted the latch, and entered with, "My blessing on all here." I need not say that Father Horrigan was a welcome guest wherever he went, for no man was more pious or better beloved in the country. Now, it was a great trouble to Dermot that he had nothing to offer his reverence for supper as a relish to the potatoes, which the old woman, for so Dermot called his wife, though she was not much past 20, had down boiling in a pot over the fire. He thought of the net which he had set in the river, but as it had been there only a short time, the chances were against his finding a fish in it. "No matter," thought Dermot, "there can be no harm in stepping down to try, and maybe, as I want the fish for the priest's supper, that one will be there before me." Down to the riverside went Dermot, and he found in the net as fine a salmon as ever jumped in the bright waters of the spreading Lee, but as he was going to take it out, the net was pulled from him, he could not tell how or by whom, and away got the salmon, and went swimming along with the current as gaily as if nothing had happened. Dermot looked sorrowfully at the wake which the fish had left upon the water, shining like a line of silver in the moonlight, and then, with an angry motion of his right hand and a stamp of his foot, gave vent to his feelings by muttering, "May bitter bad luck attend you night and day for a blackguard schemer of a salmon, wherever you go. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, if there's any shame in you, to give me the slip after this fashion. And I'm clear in my own mind you'll come to no good, for some kind of evil thing or other helped you. Did I not feel it pull the net against me as strong as the devil himself?" "That's not true for you," said one of the little fairies, who had scampered off at the approach of the priest, coming up to Dermot Leary with a whole throng of companions at his heels. "There was only 12.5 of us pulling against you." Dermot gazed on the tiny speaker with wonder, who continued, "Make yourself no ways uneasy about the priest's supper, for if you will go back and ask him one question from us, there will be as fine a supper as ever was put on a table spread out before him in less than no time." "I'll have nothing at all to do with you," replied Dermot in a tone of determination, and after a pause he added, "I'm much obliged to you for your offer, sir, but I know better than to sell myself to you, or the like of you, for a supper, and more than that, I know Father Horrigan has more regard for my soul than to wish me pledge it for ever after. out of regard for anything you could put before him, so there's an end of the matter." The little speaker, with a pertinacity not to be repulsed by Dermot's manner, continued, "Will you ask the priest one civil question for us?" Dermot considered for some time, and he was right in doing so, but he thought that no one could come to harm out of asking a civil question. "I see no objection to do that same, gentleman," said Dermot, "but I will have nothing in life to do with your supper. Mind that." "Then," said the little speaking fairy, whilst the rest came crowding after him from all parts, "go and ask Father Horrigan to tell us whether our souls will be saved at the last day, like the souls of good Christians. And if you wish us well, bring back word what he says without delay." Away went Dermot to his cabin, where he found the potatoes thrown out on the table, and his good woman handing the biggest of them all, a beautiful laughing red apple, smoking like a hard-ridden horse on a frosty night, over to Father Horrigan. "Please, your reverence," said Dermot, after some hesitation, "may I make bold to ask your honour one question?" "What may that be?" said Father Horrigan. "Why then, begging your reverence's pardon for my freedom, it is, if the souls of the good people are to be saved at the last day." "Who bid you ask me that question, Leary?" said the priest, fixing his eyes upon him very sternly, which Dermot could not stand before at all. "I'll tell no lies about the matter, and nothing in life but the truth," said Dermot. "It was the good people themselves who sent me to ask the question, and there they are in thousands down on the bank of the river, waiting for me to go back with the answer." "Go back, by all means," said the priest, "and tell them, if they want to know, to come here to me themselves, and I'll answer that or any other question they are pleased to ask with the greatest pleasure in life." Dermot accordingly returned to the fairies, who came swarming around about him to hear what the priest had said in reply, and Dermot spoke out among them like a bold man as he was. But when they heard that they must go to the priest, away they fled, some here and more there, and some this way and more that, whisking by poor Dermot so fast and in such numbers that he was quite bewildered. When he came to himself, which was not for a long time, back he went to his cabin, and ate his dry potatoes along with Father Horrigan, who made quite light of the thing. But Dermot could not help thinking it a mighty hard case that his reverence, whose words had the power to banish the fairies at such a rate, should have no sort of relish to his supper, and that the fine salmon he had in the net should have been got away from him in such a manner. The White Trout. There was once upon a time, long ago, a beautiful lady that lived in a castle upon the lake beyond, and they say she was promised to a king's son, and they were to be married, when all of a sudden he was murdered, the creature, Lord help us, and thrown into the lake above, and so, of course, he couldn't keep his promise to the fair lady, and more's the pity. Well, the story goes that she went out of her mind because of losing the king's son, for she was tender-hearted, God help her, like the rest of us, and pined away after him, until at last no one about seen her good or bad, and the story went that the fairies took her away. Well, sir, in course of time, the white trout, God bless it, was seen in the stream beyond, and sure the people didn't know what to think of the creature, seeing as how a white trout was never heard of afore, nor since. And years upon years the trout was there, just where you seen it this blessed minute, longer nor I can tell, aye, troth, and beyond the memory of the oldest in the village. At last the people began to think it must be a fairy, for what else could it be? And no hurt nor harm was ever put on the white trout, until some wicked sinners as soldiers came to these parts, and laughed at all the people, and jibed and jeered them for thinking of the likes. And one of them in particular, bad luck to him, God forgive me for saying it, swore he'd catch the trout and ate it for his dinner, the blackguard. Well, what would you think of the villainy of the soldier? Sure enough, he catched the trout, and away with him home, and puts on the frying pan, and into it he pitches the purty little thing. The trout squealed all as one as a Christian creature, and, my dear, you'd think the soldier had split his sides laughing, for he was a hardened villain. And when he thought one side was done, he turns it over to fry the other. And what would you think? But the divil a taste of a burn was on it at all. And sure the soldier thought it was a quare trout that could not be briled. But, says he, I'll give it another turn by and by, little thinking what was in store for him, the heathen. Well, when he thought that side was done, he turns it again, and lo and behold you, the divil a taste more done that side was nor the other. Bad luck to me, says the soldier, but that bates the world, says he. But I'll try ye again, my darling, says he, as cunning as ye think yourself. And so with that he turns it over and over, but not a sign of the fire was on the purty trout. Well, says the desperate villain, for sure, sir, only he was a desperate villain entirely, he might know he was doing a wrong thing, seeing that all his endeavours was no good. Well, says he, my jolly little trout, maybe you're fried enough, though you don't seem over well dressed, but you may be better than you look, like a singed cat, and a tidbit after all, says he. And with that he ups with his knife and fork to taste a piece of the trout. But, my jewel, the minute he puts his knife into the fish, there was a murdering screech that you'd think the life 'ud lave ye if you heard it, and away jumps the trout out of the frying pan into the middle of the floor, and on the spot where it fell, up riz a lovely lady, the beautifullest creature that ever I seen, dressed in white, and a band of gold in her hair, and a stream of blood running down her arm. Look where you cut me, you villain, says she, and she held out her arm to him, and, my dear, he thought the sight had lave his eyes. Couldn't you lave me cool and comfortable in the river where you snared me, and not disturb me in my duty, says she. Well, he trembled like a dog in a wet sack, and at last he stammered out something and begged for his life, and asked her ladyship's pardon, and said he didn't know she was on duty, or he was too good a soldier not to know better nor to meddle with her. I was on duty then, says the lady. I was watching for my true love that is coming by water to me, says she, and if he comes while I'm away, and that I miss of him, I'll turn you into a pinguine, and I'll hunt you up and down for evermore, while grass grows or water runs. Well, the soldier thought the life 'ud lave him at the thoughts of his being turned into a pinguine, and begged for mercy, and with that says the lady, Renounce your evil courses, says she, you villain, or you'll repent it too late, and be a good man for the future, and go to your duty reg'lar. And now, says she, take me back and put me into the river again where you found me. Oh, my lady, says the soldier, how could I have the heart to drown a beautiful lady like you? But before he could say another word, the lady was vanished, and there he saw the little trout on the ground. Well, he put it in a clean plate, and away he runs for the bare life, for fear her lover would come while she was away. And he run, even till he came to the cave again, and threw the trout into the river. The minute he did, the water was as red as blood for a little while, by raison of the cut, I suppose, until the stream washed the stain away. And to this day there's a little red mark on the trout's side where it was cut. Well, sir, from that day out the soldier was an altered man, and reformed his ways, and went to his duty reg'lar, and fasted 3 times a week, though it was never fish he took on fasting days, for after the fright he got, fish 'ud never rest on his stomach, save in your presence. But anyhow he was an altered man, as I said before, and in course of time he left the army, and turned a hermit at last, and they say he used to pray evermore for the soul of the white trout. The Tale of Daniel O'Rourke. People may have heard of the renowned adventures of Daniel O'Rourke, but how few are there who know that the cause of all his perils, above and below, was neither more nor less than his having slept under the walls of the Pooka's Tower. I knew the man well. He lived at the bottom of Hungry Hill, just at the right-hand side of the road as you go towards Bantry. An old man was he at the time he told me the story, with grey hair and a red nose, and it was on the 25th of June, 1813, that I heard it from his own lips, as he sat smoking his pipe under the old poplar tree on as fine an evening as ever shone from the sky. I was going to visit the caves in Dursey Island, having spent the morning at Glengariff. "I am often asked to tell it, sir," said he, "so that this is not the first time. The master's son, you see, had come from beyond foreign parts in France and Spain, as young gentlemen used to go before Bonaparte or any such was heard of. And sure enough there was a dinner given to all the people on the ground, gentle and simple, high and low, rich and poor. The old gentlemen were the gentlemen after all, saving your honour's presence. They'd swear at a body a little, to be sure, and maybe give one a cut of a whip now and then, but we were no losers by it in the end. And they were so easy and civil, and kept such rattling houses, and thousands of welcomes, and there was no grinding for rent, and there was hardly a tenant on the estate that did not taste of his landlord's bounty often and often in a year. But now it's another thing. No matter for that, sir, for I'd better be telling you my story. Well, we had everything of the best, and plenty of it, and we ate, and we drank, and we danced, and the young master, by the same token, danced with Peggy Barry from the Boreen. A lovely young couple they were, though they are both low enough now. To make a long story short, I got, as a body may say, the same thing as tipsy almost, for I can't remember ever at all, no ways, how it was I left the place. Only I did leave it, that's certain. Well, I thought, for all that, in myself, I'd just step to Molly Cronahan's, the fairy woman, to speak a word about the bracket heifer that was bewitched. And so, as I was crossing the stepping stones of the ford of Ballyashanoch, and was looking up at the stars and blessing myself, for why, it was Lady Day, I missed my foot, and souse I fell into the water. Death alive, thought I, I'll be drowned now. However, I began swimming away for the dear life, till at last I got ashore somehow or other, but never the one of me can tell how, upon a dissolute island. I wandered and wandered about there, without knowing where I wandered, until at last I got into a big bog. The moon was shining as bright as day, or your fair lady's eyes, sir, with your pardon for mentioning her, and I looked east and west, and north and south, and every way, and nothing did I see but bog, bog, bog. I could never find out how I got into it, and my heart grew cold with fear, for sure and certain I was that it would be my burying place. So I sat down upon a stone which, as good luck would have it, was close by me, and I began to scratch my head and sing the Ullagon, when all of a sudden the moon grew black, and I looked up and saw something for all the world as if it was moving down between me and it, and I could not tell what it was. Down it came with a pounce, and looked at me full in the face, and what was it but an eagle, as fine a one as ever flew from the kingdom of Kerry. So he looked at me in the face, and he says to me, "Daniel O'Rourke," says he, "how do you do?" "Very well, I thank you, sir," says I. "I hope you're well." Wondering out of my senses all the time how an eagle came to speak like a Christian. "What brings you here, Dan?" says he. "Nothing at all, sir," says I. "Only I wish I was safe home again." "Is it out of the island you want to go, Dan?" says he. "'Tis, sir," says I. So I up and told him how I had taken a drop too much, and fell into the water, how I swam to the island, and how I got into the bog and did not know my way out of it. "Dan," says he, after a minute's thought, "though it is very improper for you to get drunk on Lady Day, yet as you are a decent sober man, who tends mass well, and never flings stones at me or mine, nor cries out after us in the fields, my life for yours," says he. "So get up on my back, and grip me well for fear you'd fall off, and I'll fly you out of the bog." "I am afraid," says I, "your honour's making game of me, for who ever heard of riding a horseback on an eagle before?" "'Pon the honour of a gentleman," says he, putting his right foot on his breast, "I am quite in earnest, and so now either take my offer or starve in the bog. Besides, I see that your weight is sinking the stone." It was true enough as he said, for I found the stone every minute going from under me. I had no choice, so thinks I to myself, faint heart never won fair lady, and this is fair persuadance. "I thank your honour," says I, "for the loan of your civility, and I'll take your kind offer." I therefore mounted upon the back of the eagle, and held him tight enough by the throat, and up he flew in the air like a lark. Little I knew the trick he was going to serve me. Up, 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 God knows how far up he flew. Why then, said I to him, thinking he did not know the right road home, very civilly, because why, I was in his power entirely. Sir, says I, please your honour's glory, and with humble submission to your better judgment, if you'd fly down a bit, you're now just over my cabin, and I could be put down there, and many thanks to your worship. Arrah, Dan, said he, do you think me a fool? Look down in the next field, and don't you see 2 men and a gun? By my word, it would be no joke to be shot this way, to oblige a drunken blackguard that I picked up off a cold stone in a bog. Bother you, said I to myself, but I did not speak out, for where was the use? Well, sir, up he kept flying, and I asking him every minute to fly down, and all to no use. Where in the world are you gone, sir? Says I to him. Hold your tongue, Dan, says he. Mind your own business, and don't be interfering with the business of other people. Faith, this is my business, I think, says I. Be quiet, Dan, says he. So I said no more. At last, where should we come to but to the moon itself? Now you can't see it from this, but there is, or there was in my time, a reaping hook sticking out of the side of the moon this way. Dan, said the eagle, I'm tired with this long fly. I had no notion 'twas so far. And my lord, sir, said I, who in the world asked you to fly so far? Was it I? Did not I beg and pray and beseech you to stop half an hour ago? There's no use talking, Dan, said he. I'm tired bad enough, so you must get off and sit down on the moon until I rest myself. Is it sit down on the moon, said I. Is it upon that little round thing, then? Why, then sure I'd fall off in a minute and be kilt and spilt and smashed all to bits. You're a vile deceiver, so you are. Not at all, Dan, says he. You can catch fast hold of that reaping hook that's sticking out of the side of the moon, and 'twill keep you up. I won't then, said I. Maybe not, said he, quite quiet. If you don't, my man, I shall just give you a shake and one slap of my wing, and send you down to the ground, where every bone in your body will be smashed as small as a drop of dew on a cabbage leaf in the morning. Why, then I'm in a fine way, said I to myself, ever to have come along with the likes of you. And so giving him a hearty curse in Irish, for fear he'd know what I said, I got off his back with a heavy heart, took hold of the reaping hook, and sat down upon the moon, and a mighty cold seat it was, I can tell you that. When he had me there fairly landed, he turned about on me and said, Good morning to you, Daniel O'Rourke, said he. I think I've nicked you fairly now. You robbed my nest last year. 'Twas true enough for him, but how he found it out is hard to say. And in return you are freely welcome to cool your heels dangling upon the moon like a cockthrow. Is that all? And is this the way you leave me, you brute, you, says I, you ugly, unnatural beast, and is this the way you serve me at last? Bad luck to yourself with your hooked beak, and to all your breed, you blackguard. 'Twas all to no manner of use. He spread out his great big wings, burst out a-laughing, and flew away like lightning. I bawled after him to stop, but I might have called and bawled forever without his minding me. Away he went, and I never saw him from that day to this, sorrow fly away with him. You may be sure I was in a disconsolate condition, and kept roaring out for the bare grief, but all at once a door opened right in the middle of the moon, creaking on its hinges as if it had not been opened for a month before. I suppose they never thought of greasing 'em, and out there walks, well, who do you think but the man in the moon himself? I knew him by his bush. Good morrow to you, Daniel O'Rourke, says he. How do you do? Very well, thank your honour, said I. I hope your honour's well. What brought you here, Dan? Said he. So I told him how I was a little overtaken in liquor at the master's, and how I was cast on a dissolute island, and how I lost my way in the bog, and how the thief of an eagle promised to fly me out of it, and how, instead of that, he had fled me up to the moon. Dan, said the man in the moon, taking a pinch of snuff when I was done, you must not stay here. Indeed, sir, says I, 'tis much against my will I'm here at all. But how am I to go back? That's your business, said he. Dan, mine is to tell ye that here ye must not stay, so be off in less than no time. I'm doing no harm, says I, only holding on hard by the reaping hook lest I fall off. That's what you must not do, Dan, says he. Pray, sir, says I, may I ask how many you are in family that you would not give a poor traveller lodging? I'm sure 'tis not so often you're troubled with strangers coming to see you, for 'tis a long way. I'm by myself, Dan, says he, but you'd better let go the reaping hook. Faith, and with your leave, says I, I'll not let go the grip, and the more you bids me, the more I won't let go, so I will. You had better, Dan, says he again. Why then, my little fellow, says I, taking the whole weight of him with my eye from head to foot, there are 2 words to that bargain, and I'll not budge, but you may if you like. We'll see how that is to be, says he, and back he went, giving the door such a great bang after him, for it was plain he was hoffed, that I thought the moon and all would fall down with it. Well, I was preparing myself to try strength with him, when back again he comes, with the kitchen cleaver in his hand, and without saying a word, he gives 2 bangs to the handle of the reaping hook that was keeping me up, and whap it came in 2. Good morning to you, Dan, says the spiteful little old blackguard, when he saw me cleanly falling down with a bit of the handle in my hand. I thank you for your visit, and fair weather after you, Daniel. I had not time to make any answer to him, for I was tumbling over and rolling at the rate of a fox hunt. God help me, says I, but this is a pretty pickle for a decent man to be seen in at this time of night. I am now sold fairly. But word was not out of my mouth when, whiz, what should fly by close to my ear but a flock of wild geese, all the way from my own bog of Ballyashinog, else how should they know me? The old gander, who was their general, turning his head, cried out to me, Is that you, Dan? The same, said I, and not a bit daunted now at what he said, for I was by this time used to all kinds of bedevilment, and besides I knew him of old. Good morrow to you, says he. Daniel O'Rourke, how are you in health this morning? Very well, sir, says I. I thank you kindly, drawing my breath, for I was mightily in want of some. I hope your honour's the same. I think 'tis falling you are, Daniel, says he. You may say that, sir, says I. And where are you going all the way so fast? Said the gander. So I told him how I had taken the drop, and how I came on the island, and how I lost my way in the bog, and how the thief of an eagle flew me up to the moon, and how the man in the moon turned me out. Dan, said he, I'll save you. Put out your hand and catch me by the leg, and I'll fly you home. Sweet is your hand in a pitcher of honey, my jewel, says I, though all the time I thought within myself that I don't much trust you. But there was no help, for I caught the gander by the leg, and away I and the other geese flew after him as fast as hops. We flew, and we flew, and we flew, until we came right over the wide ocean. I knew it well, for I saw Cape Clear to my right hand, sticking up out of the water. Ah, my lord, said I to the goose, for I thought it best to keep a civil tongue in my head anyway. Fly to land, if you please. It is impossible, you see, Dan, said he, for a while, because, you see, we are going to Arabia. To Arabia, said I. That's surely some place in foreign parts, far away. Oh, Mr. Goose, why then, to be sure, I'm a man to be pitied among you. Whist, whist, you fool, said he, hold your tongue. I tell you, Arabia is a very decent sort of place, as like West Carbery as one egg is like another, only there is a little more sand there. Just as we were talking, a ship hove in sight, scudding so beautiful before the wind. Ah, then, sir, said I, will you drop me on the ship, if you please? We are not fair over it, said he. If I dropped you now, you would go splash into the sea. I would not, says I. I know better than that, for it is just clean under us, so let me drop now at once. If you must, said he. There, take your own way. And he opened his claw, and faith, he was right. Sure enough, I came down plump into the very bottom of the salt sea. Down to the very bottom I went, and I gave myself up then forever, when a whale walked up to me, scratching himself after his night's sleep, and looked me full in the face, and never the word did he say, but lifting up his tail, he splashed me all over again with the cold salt water, till there wasn't a dry stitch upon my whole carcass. And I heard somebody saying, 'twas a voice I knew, too, "Get up, you drunken brute, off of that!" And with that I woke up, and there was Judy with a tub full of water, which she was splashing all over me, for rest her soul, though she was a good wife, she never could bear to see me and drink, and had a bitter hand of her own. "Get up," said she again, "and of all places in the parish would no place serve your turn to lie down upon but under the old walls of Carrigapuka? Uneasy resting I am sure you had of it." And sure enough I had, for I was fairly bothered out of my senses with eagles and men of the moons and flying ganders and whales driving me through bogs and up to the moon and down to the bottom of the green ocean. If I was in drink 10 times over, long would it be before I'd lie down again in the same spot again. I know that.